Driveline R&D podcast, episode 51. This is Alex Caravan, Driveline Baseball Manager of Data Science. Actually, quick announcement, by the way. If you haven't applied for R&D analytics position and want to, you should do so like next 48 hours because I'm taking the posting down. Anyways, drinking a Crooked Tree India Pale. Lindley?
Lindley, sports engineer, drinking a Sierra Nevada Fantastic Haze Imperial IPA.
I'm Anthony Brady, Driveline Baseball, biomech, sports scientist, all those. Also, as Caravan mentioned, sports science at Driveline Baseball is also hiring, looking for sports scientist, summer intern, and an ASAP immediate biomechanics intern. Today, I'm drinking Zipline German-style Kolsch. I actually don't know what a Kolsch is. Do either of you know what a Kolsch is?
I think it's another name for a stout.
This does not look very dark, so I hope not.
I thought it was a light beer.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it looks pretty light.
And we got a special guest to keep dry January, going to dry February. Lindley used to be on dry January. Now he switched over to booze in February. But we got Dean Jackson. we got Dean Jackson repping some water. Dean, great to have you on, man.
Absolutely, baby. And as Lindley said before, I'm manager of something. Everything always changes around. Pitching coordinator. Don't really know what I do at Driveline. I do a bunch of things on the pitching side.
Dude, I think that's actually a really good starting point. I feel like I'm actually really interested if all the people, all the new people at Driveline, what they think you do, dude, because you're clearly like super involved on like higher level discussions and are you know, like people ask your opinion on mechanics, training, all this stuff. You also got low-key the most poppin' social media on Driveline because of your girlfriend's thumbnails. I mean, I said it. I'm just gonna come out and say it, dude. I'm only gonna wait 2 minutes in the podcast to say it. Yeah. Do you kind of want to give a little bit of background how you got to your nebulous position and how you got started with Driveline?
Yeah, so I came to Driveline to train in late 2015. So it was like December 2015. And basically what drew me there was I had this big hip injury and I had a massive decrease in velocity, like a 10 mile an hour decrease. And at the time, pitching, like how the landscape of training for pitching worked was like super different. So different than it is today. So nobody really had good answers as to like, well, how do you throw harder? How does it work? How does the throw work? How does training work? Any of that. Nobody had good answers for it. And it was so different than now that if you asked those questions, you were looked at as like a major outcast, as like somebody who is very weird and like almost like, why would you ask those questions? What are you doing? You know, like very like poke the weird guy with a stick type mentality, you know? And so I found Driveline on social media and I immediately recognized that like that was the place that they wanted to find the answers. So wanted to be involved. And obviously when I was playing, I just went up to learn what I could for me playing and ended up picking up a few miles an hour. I think it was like 3 or 4 miles an hour over about a year training there. And it was all training concepts that I was already using, but it made a whole lot more sense. And it was within a group of people that were all like-minded, which makes things a lot easier training-wise. And fast forward, went into pro ball, ended up getting hurt in pro ball, transitioned into coaching. So worked at Driveline as a throwing trainer, then had to get an elbow surgery. So I transitioned into an online trainer. Then a few months later, transitioned into building out the whole online program, which then turned into hiring a bunch of online trainers and deciding what we're going to teach and a whole bunch of different things. So as the manager of online training at that point, And then that turned into let's figure out how online training works for all the different departments, and then kind of handed off those departments and went more back towards pitching. And now I'm kind of involved in like, what's next? Like what do we kind of got a good handle on like how pitching training works, but what's next? We're really good at doing what we've built for the last few years, but like, what's the next thing? And that's where I'm involved in, obviously, with all of you guys on the R&D side. And that's what I'm super passionate about is like, what's important? Like, how do we take guys, like we can take, most people throw 90, we can take most people to that point these days. We can take most people there. That's a serious thing. Most guys are like, hear me out.
Funny.
Hear me out. Most guys are super dedicated and like they want to go and train and they want to figure it out. Like throwing 90 is no longer as big of a deal as it used to be, right?
Yeah.
But what's possible? Is it possible to say the same thing about throwing 96, about 97, 98? And that's what I'm super passionate about is like, let's figure this whole thing out. How does the whole thing work? Which I know I DM Lindley constantly and he makes fun of me because he says we'll never figure it out. But that's all right, man. We're all here trying to figure it out. And there's the synopsis of how I got to where I'm at.
That's pretty far. I want to ask real quick on the online pitching. I just want to like get the plug because honestly, like online training and online pitching specifically, I think has gone through like so many iterations to get to this point. Do you have like a 2-minute, sales pitch of like what do you get with like the online pitching experience?
Sure. So, in online pitching, you'll get basically your throwing and your lifting all written out. You'll get mechanical analysis. Big point in the mechanical analysis is actually learning how the throw works. So anybody can analyze your mechanics, but if they give you things to change that like don't make a big difference, or if they tell you things that you don't really understand, you're just going to end up messing other things up when you try and change them. So that's the biggest point of mechanical analysis is actually how does the throw work, which big props to you guys on the R&D side. You're such a big part of figuring out what we have figured out so far. Obviously, there's more to learn, but we have learned so much. And on the throwing side, basically, like throughout the year, your schedule is going to change. So depending on your goals, are you trying to pitch as a starter? Are you trying to pitch as a reliever? Like what happens, like in your season, your role is going to change. All these different things are going to change. When you go into off season, sometimes you're training at this place, you're training at that place. You have this weird schedule or there's other things coming up. And we can take all those variables into account and write a really good throwing and lifting program around all those that will continue your progression. And then the last little bit is just you have access 24/7 to an online trainer who has been through, let's see, most of our guys are either done with their careers or currently in their professional careers.
Yep.
So they've played for over a decade, all of them. A lot of them multiple years at the professional level, multiple years at the college level, multiple years at the high school level, all being surrounded by where things have gone with Driveline. So they not only have a whole bunch of experience from their training and their own career, but they have a huge amount of experience from Driveline and the people around us. So for me, it's just such a no-brainer. If you want to accelerate your career and what you know and your playing ability, if you want to have a career in baseball or training, like it's just a no-brainer to me to sign up for online training and just start freaking picking the brain like no other, because that's what you're paying for,
Yeah, and it's $199 a month, right?
Yep. Yeah. $199 a month.
Yeah. And 10% off if you DM Caravan and ask for that rate. So he'll Venmo you the 10% difference if you want that discount.
And the thing is, I'll actually Venmo. Here's the thing, dude. I'm down for that. DM me. I'll pay you $20. That's the thing, though. I just get sucked in these things. I want to let Lindley ask this question, but I was just gonna say, just for a future note. Like we just did I said that a couple episodes ago, if you DM me about a pop-up shop assessment, I'll give you a discount. A guy did who we're going to do a segment with on the podcast.
Yeah.
And he DM'd me and I was like, should I hit up CR? I was like, I don't even want to bother them, dude. So I just Venmoed him like $100.
It's actually pretty fire. We're gonna film his athlete biomech meeting right after this podcast for like a segment, so it'll be pretty tight. But
I don't know why my dude, month after month I'm like, how am I not making any money, dude? I'm literally my rent's not that expensive. I'm making no money. But yeah, anyways, Lindley,
10% off.
I was gonna start with the second part of this question, but I kind of want to change it up since you were just talking about how a lot of the online trainers have playing experience. This is kind of a cliche question, I think, but what do you think is the most valuable thing of being an experienced pitcher and how that helps you train other athletes?
That's a really good question. There's always that kind of thought floating around where there's two sides of the coin, right? Where it's either, you have to have done whatever activity it is to coach it, or you don't have to have done whatever activity it is to coach it, if that makes sense. But there's so many aspects of coaching pitching that doing it helps you in certain aspects, but it can also hurt you because you're blind to certain things, or you think you have more experience than you actually do, and you think you can talk on things that you actually can't. That's one of the things that I've learned with you guys. I mean, Lindley and Brady the most, where like I'll bring something up and you guys will be like, prove it. Like I'll bring up some conception that I have about throwing, or some conception that I have about how things work, and you'll be like, prove it. And I'll be like, well, I can feel it. And you're like, that's great. Does that mean it's happening? And I'm like, no. So on one hand, I think it's such a big advantage to have thrown at a high level for me. High level, I mean, in air quotes, because there's always people who have played at a higher level than you, and always people who are better than you, Yeah. So I think it's such an advantage for me because I know what the athlete is attempting to accomplish. And there's a lot of positions that I've been in where I've accomplished what they're trying to do and been from where they are and go to where they want to go type thing. So I kind of know how that feels. I know how it works mentally, like the process of going through things. But also at the same time, there's a lot of misconceptions that come along with it. So just playing on its own isn't enough to be able to coach at all angles. You guys keep me in check so much in terms of like what I can actually say and what I know and what I don't actually know, which is great. So I think it's kind of it's a good and a bad thing. Obviously, if you haven't played, it's going to be hard to communicate those things. Yep. But if you had played, it's not just like the end all, everything that you're talking about. If that makes sense.
Yeah. And then more specifically, you mentioned a couple injuries you had with your hip and then also elbow injuries. What effect do you think that has on your approach to training other athletes or training yourself?
It's changed my relationship with risk. So when I was younger, I was extremely just like did not care at all about any sort of risk. If the risk was like this massive risk for this tiny little gain, I would go for it anyways, because you tend to do that when you've never been burned, Mm-hmm. And then I got burned on my hip injury, which was this massive injury, lost 10 miles an hour, took 2 years to rehab from it. That's not an over exaggeration. Took legitimately 2 years to rehab. And then I became super risk averse, right? So now I'm afraid of risk because now it's not worth it. But then you realize that you don't get any better when everything has risk. Driving your car down the street has risk. Mm-hmm. Everything does. So I think the injuries and going through them has given me a much better relationship with risk. Which I'm sure people who follow my social media will drastically disagree with me and that I am way too comfortable with risk. But I think I have a much better relationship with risk because I've been burned, because I've had to come back in multiple different capacities of that. And it's helped me learn so much about the process because a lot of times, this is a little bit off topic, but just a quick note, a lot of times athletes will go through injuries and their coaches will kind of shy away from it because they don't feel comfortable talking about it. Because they don't really know, so then the athlete's left there, doesn't understand why everybody's left them. And it's a very emotional period of time and they want some help, but no one's there to give help because the other people don't feel like they're qualified. Yeah. So for me, even though I'm not qualified, I'm not a PT, I'm not qualified to talk about these things, but I've been through them and I have a little bit of knowledge on them because I've had to come through things from so many different angles and I've experienced it. So it can approach it in a way that it helps the athlete, I think, much better.
Yeah, and I think it was almost like offensive at some points, like from the injury perspective. Maybe not so much like the lack of talking about it, but like people who got super, like reductionist and just like simplified the shit out of it. Like, oh, it's just your mechanics. Like, that's why you had 2 TJs. It's like, what? Like, What about my mechanics? Like, that's literally not helpful. Or after I had my second one, people were like, you came back too early. And it's like, okay, well, I did the plan. And like, definitely in my playing career in that like mental, emotional aspect, like honesty was just much better for me. Like the most valuable thing I heard after like coming back from the first Tommy John, realizing I'd torn it a second time, was my athletic trainer saying, look, someone has to make up that other, 12%. And I don't know why. Like, we don't know why this happened. We can like theorize, but really we don't know. And sometimes it's just like someone's in that 11% and it sucks. And that was like a very just realistic approach to it, which definitely changed my mentality around like rehab and whatnot the second time, like not looking at it as, if I do this, I'm going to be healthy and pitch for, 20 years kind of a thing. So I think that that risk comment is really fire.
Are you referring to 11% of people who get re-injured?
Just like I don't exactly know the number. I think at the time I was told that like 89% of people successfully come back from Tommy John, 11% do reconstruction.
88 after you, bro.
Yeah. I'm sure that number's changed. I think it actually might have been like 88 and 12, but I just remember him telling me that, and that being like a powerful, realistic approach to injury rehab, stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I was actually going to ask a really similar question. I wasn't really planning on asking this, but it's kind of occurred to me. This would be interesting. What do you guys think? And I'm interested not just in Dean's answer, but also your guys' answer. What do you guys think is like one of the largest things, like the random coach or random person on Twitter is kind of missing out of the big picture when they talk about injury risk, right? Like if they're gonna like toss around like, okay, so and so is gonna get injured, that's why so and so got injured. Like, what do you think is like the biggest gap, if you could just like sit down with them and distill it as succinctly as possible?
Well, this has been one of the big things that I've been really looking into recently is, there's a quote that I read from Stan Efferding, who obviously is, I saw that smile, Lindley. Love the guy. But there's a quote from Stan Efferding that I read where it said, you don't grow in the gym, which I think is such an important piece. You only break down in the gym and you grow outside. Now, whether we're talking muscles, whether we're talking bone adaptation or tendon adaptation or ligament, it doesn't matter. Like the point is still the same. Too. Yeah, or mental things, like actually learning. Like the point is still the same, that in your training, you break down, and outside of your training, you build back up in whatever capacity you are building back up. So I think the vast majority of people just look at the breaking down and like the mechanics of the breaking down, and they say, oh, well, that's what's going to get you hurt. Or because you're training this way, you're going to get hurt. But in reality, the building back up is one of the most important parts. Like as long as you break down in a very, just a normal fashion, you're not like, oh, I haven't thrown in 6 weeks and let me pull down today. Like that's obviously, you're going to hurt yourself. But the vast majority of people that you see get hurt, I don't think, in my opinion, are just like have this drastically incorrect way of training or this drastically incorrect like breaking down or training that you may say. I've been looking a lot more at like what's happening with their sleep. Like how does long-term sleep issues affect how they actually recover? Things like insulin resistance, like how's that actually affecting the muscle that you're able to build? What ends up happening, nutrient distribution, like once it goes in, because you can control what you eat, but you can't control what your body does with it and things like that. So that's the biggest thing that I would bring to their mind is like alongside of you can measure what the forces the athlete has to handle are, but you can't really measure what the forces the athlete can actually handle are, if that makes sense. So if you've got a 200 Newton meter throw, you may be like, wow, that's a whole lot. Yeah. But if the threshold's 400 Newton meters, like it's nothing, Yeah. So, someone may have a 100 Newton meter throw and you say, oh, that's not that much. But if their threshold's 90, they're going to break. So that's the biggest thing that a few things that I would bring forward.
I mean, so similar to what Dean's saying, but for me, it's always been like people looking at injuries acutely. I think that's like, especially in baseball, like one of the more frustrating things. And I think in general it's tough with sports because like if you look at other sports, a lot of like contact injuries and whatnot can be related to an acute event, right? Like if someone tears their ACL in football because of just like a really, really rough hit where they're like contorted oddly, you can't like look at that the same way that you look at someone tearing their UCL from pitching. Like the movement is more repetitive and you're doing over and over again. And then at some point you break that threshold and it breaks. It's not like, something uniquely different. I guess there are probably like fringe cases in throwing where that's happened, but it's just not an acute injury mechanism. And if you like right off the bat are starting your framing of the injury from like that acute perspective, you're just going to forget about all the other stuff that Dean has like talked about, right? Because you just would look at it from the perspective of mechanics or what happened in that throw when there's so much that could have gone into it, prior to that, weeks, months, years before, kind of a thing. So that's for sure mine.
I think this is a relatively unknown area of like really anywhere study. Not similar, but just like genetics and how different separate athletes are. I don't think it's super clear how much of a difference it makes, like whether it is practically significant or not, but I imagine that it is. And I think that that is something that coaches probably don't think about, because I think even a lot of scientists and researchers into this whole idea don't really think about maybe enough. But I just think that I don't know, for example, when we go over to Japan, we see these guys are just throwing infinite throws in practice and everything. I just think that maybe and they just seem to not get hurt. I just think that maybe those guys are they're less likely to get hurt just because of some untrained some genetic factors. So I think it's easy to say if somebody gets hurt, it's easy to look back and be like, oh, he got hurt because of this.
Yep.
But when in reality, it could just be something that nobody can actually control.
Yeah.
Most of those takes are lazy, in my opinion. They got hurt because of their mechanics. Oh, they got hurt because of their training. It's just a lazy take.
100%.
When you actually look at what goes into an athlete being injured, you realize how many data points you have to collect and how many data points you can't collect. And then you realize, holy cow, this is a whole lot more than just, oh, his arm looks weird when he throws, or, oh, his elbow goes higher than his shoulder plane in this two-dimensional video that I watched, for example. So, that's
100%. I was going to say really quickly, from my point of view, I think at least some of you guys know, I've been working for a while, and recently been working with David Besky on this. I've been working for a while on the we call it the Green Elbows project at Driveline. For a couple years. So we already have a huge advantage in doing some sort of injury risk analysis from a modeling point of view, because we have the same physical therapist we've had the last couple of years, Terry Phillips. He's great. He screens every athlete. Any athlete that's not completely healthy, he either puts on low elbow, low shoulder, low other, or shut down elbow, shut down shoulder, shut down other. So again, same guy screening everyone, which is very tough. In general, if you're going to have someone's prognosis of someone's health, a huge question mark is each physical therapist is different. So we have Terry for everyone. We have those data points. We have a couple years worth of data, and trying to look at a reason why someone went on low elbow and someone else didn't. There's so much stuff, man. Their initial biomech assessment values, how those values change from assessment to retest. Now force plate assessments, how those change from assessment to retest. Their actual training data. This got dipped twice in a row on hybrid A before. There's dozens, hundreds of column points if you want to make the most general data set possible, and then you have to filter through all of that, look at within subject differences, between subject differences. It is so hard. There's so many things to look at, and again, we come from a spot where we can really try to optimize our own injury tracking, and still really, really hard sometimes to find a case. I was going to say really quickly, one thing you mentioned, Dean, that I know you've been on the sleep train for quite a while. How's that going from? Because I know a while back when you were collecting whoop band numbers and fatigue numbers from clients. How's that going? Have you found a system that works, or what have you gotten many insights from that?
First, I'd like to make a statement. Kyle Lindley, sleep is not a joke, so I don't appreciate.
I wasn't laughing at sleep. No, listen, dude, I was laughing because he called it the sleep train, and I just thought that was a funny pun because my sense of humor is ridiculous.
I like it. You're thinking on your feet. You don't like sleep. I get it, man. It's cool. No, I'm just playing. So basically, I've been kind of diving in. Well, it first started. This is how a lot of things start with me. I have a lot of problems.
Wait, hold up. First. What are you at right now? Average hours of sleep, and where were you 2 years ago?
Oh, well, so the average hours of sleep is a little bit better. Are you talking over a 3-day average, 7-day average, or 30-day average?
Fuck me up, fam.
So this started, I'll explain this whole thing and I'll make it quick, but this started with a big issue for me was I get chronic migraines. And for those who aren't familiar with migraines, just understand that there's a whole bunch of neurological issues. You're not able to see very well. Things like on my face would get super numb. I couldn't think, like it just, nothing worked. It was very odd. A whole bunch of pain as well. And after one of my migraines, I didn't come back. So what I mean by that is like I lost a very large percentage of my sight, very large percentage of my cognitive ability. Force output went way down. My face was numb all the time, and everything was fine according to in and out of the hospital. About 3 years ago or something like that. Everything was fine. We spent tens of thousands of dollars in the hospital. Thanks, Mom, because I was not in the position to spend tens of thousands of dollars in the hospital. Brady, I know you've been through similar things.
Yep. Shout out Arizona.
Yeah. Shout out Mom for footing the bill. Yep. But basically, it started this very long process of me trying to figure out how the heck does the body work, because I'm in a very terrible position right now and everything says I'm fine. So clearly we're not measuring the right things. Right. And years go by and one little scrap of information after another end up finding just how important sleep is. And well, when you find out something is important, you got to figure out how to measure it. So then when you figure out how to measure it, you can learn all the little bits involved in it, and you can see how things go over time. And you learn the important players in sleep, because like sleeping good doesn't really mean anything. Like, what does that mean? So I end up finding sleep duration, like how long your sleep is important. Sleep quality is important. Learn all these things about stages of sleep. And then when you learn about stages of sleep, you learn about things that interrupt stages of sleep and cause you to get worse quality sleep and all these different things. So to answer your question, when I first started tracking, I was averaging about 6.5 hours of sleep, because I thought if I was in bed for 8 hours, that means I slept for 8 hours, which isn't how it works. You generally, if you are normal, you're generally awake for 60 to 90 minutes of the time that you're in bed for. So I was actually averaging 6.5 hours of sleep when I thought I was averaging 8. And my sleep quality in terms of deep and REM sleep, which are the deepest stages of sleep, which is where a lot of these restorative processes happen. I was averaging like 2.5 hours of that combined. Now, fast forward to the last 30 days of this period of time where I'm averaging about 8 hours of sleep. So I'm in bed for 9 to 9.5 hours. I think it's like 7:55 or something like that, just almost 8 hours. And I'm averaging 3.5 hours of deep and REM sleep. So I'm averaging literally an hour more every single night of restorative sleep. And the next question is like, well, why is that important? Because it just seems like a number. It doesn't seem that important, but there's so much research. This is one of the things I've been diving into within the last year or so. There's so much research on restorative hormones like testosterone, like HGH, that will actually not only talking from a health perspective, let's talk from an optimal athlete perspective. If you're trying to build muscle and your testosterone's below normal, you're not going to build it. Mm-hmm. If you're trying to get tendon adaptation or bone adaptation or things like that, or you're trying to heal from an injury and your HGH and IGF-1 are below normal, you're not going to heal as well. It's just the reality. So sleep, the deeper stages of sleep are when you release those hormones. So if you don't get those deeper stages of sleep, or if you get pulled out of those deeper stages of sleep, you don't release those hormones, and that effect happens over time. So it's if you think about it, it's the exact opposite of compound interest. Where compound interest, you like save an extra percent here and there, and then over time you have a whole lot more money. It's like the basics, obviously, but this is like the exact opposite. So you lose an extra percent here or there, and then over time you're like literally borderline not okay. Like not only are you not adapting to your training anymore, you're like significantly not healthy, and you got a problem. So that's where this whole thing has gone. Alex, has been such an awesome experience for me. It started in a very weird spot because I was like, why do I have all these health issues? But it ended with a way that I could help not only myself, but help a lot of other people in terms of diagnosing these issues, because people go through their whole life, man, and they don't realize how important sleep is. If we want to really hone in on sleep, they don't realize how important it is. And they don't realize like how to measure it, how to make it better, all that different, like okay, I don't get good sleep. Is that good or bad? They don't realize really how bad that is. So that's what I'm really excited. One of the things I'm excited about going forward is being able to push that information to people and hopefully see the effects on the field, but also in people's lives.
Are you still
Good.
Are you still doing the sleep leaderboard? I thought it was really interesting how you made that a competition, like made it kind of fun because I saw a bunch of athletes jump on board.
Yeah, we got like 50 athletes that jumped on it. Initially, what that started as is very selfish. It was me saying, I don't know what good sleep looks like. So I was like, hey, a whole bunch of people. I know how to use Excel. Yeah. So I'm like, I basically just made the leaderboard and then people would participate in the leaderboard and they'd enter their sleep data. And so I was providing a service to them, which was a little competition. And like, let's be honest, man, like competing against sleep that's pretty healthy. That's pretty great. Like it was super funny, like making fun of people for not getting enough sleep or not putting enough time back for sleep. It was a nice role reversal. I thought it was really funny.
Who's winning the leaderboard?
Well, Wes Burton is known as the voodoo sleeper, but we'll put a big asterisk next to that because he uses Whoop, which Whoop measures the highest amount of deep and REM compared to all of them. So all these like the Whoop, Fitbit, and Oura are the big three players in like the wearable sleep tracking market, and they all measure it a little bit differently. So Whoop would have massive amount, like he's averaging like 5.5 hours of deep and REM or something just astronomical, and it's just like that's not possible on these other technologies, but it's fine.
Which one do you use?
Fitbit.
Is that your preference over Oura?
Yeah, just because I got this Fitbit here for $50 on OfferUp. Nice. There's a few studies on it that show that time asleep, it's 95% accurate for whether you are asleep or not compared to a sleep study. And then sleep stages are like 75% accurate, but the Oura is only like 75% accurate too. So it's basically as good as you can get. It only cost me $50. There was no recurring cost. So it was easy for me to pull a trigger.
That's super fire. Yeah. I mean, anecdotally, when I was like done with college and like post college, I felt like my recovery as far as like baseball was completely different, and I attributed a lot to sleep. And I've always thought that was like a very like honestly low hanging fruit that a college baseball team could do is just like never allow any of your players to have a class or lifting before 10 a.m. or something, because like sleep in college is just abysmal across the whole team, especially when you're like, okay, 5:30 lift tomorrow, like dudes are just, I mean, in college, like guys are going to stay up to midnight or past midnight regularly. And then you're like, okay, we got max deadlifts at 5:30 a.m. kind of a thing.
Yep.
Like, honestly, like you could be terrible coaching, like mechanics, gameplay, everything else, just like terrible across the board. But I feel like you'd see pretty significant gains if you just told your whole team, like, all right, you're not allowed to schedule a class like before 10 or something,
Yeah. And quick numbers to put to it. There's a study that popped in my head recently of they took people who were in bed for 8 hours, everybody was allowed to be in bed for 8 hours. And then they measured, this was normal, healthy young men. So the average total testosterone of this group was about 750. And then
750 is average overall?
Well, 750, the reference range is 300 to 1100 for total testosterone.
Yeah. I knew it's gonna be wide. Yeah.
Yeah. It's super wide, but like if you're in 300, man, you're having a problem. It was normal, healthy young men, and let them stay in, or they told them, not let them, they told them to be in bed for 8 hours a night for a week. And then after that week, they took a baseline testosterone test, which average was 750. Now, then they split the group in half. Half of them they allowed to be in bed they forced them to be in bed for 8 hours every night for a week. The other half, they forced them to be in bed for 5 hours every night for that same week. And then they retook total testosterone. Now, every single person in the 8-hour group maintained testosterone. It was basically the same from the first test to the second test. Every single person in the 5-hour group lost at least 10% on their total testosterone, and the peak was like 20% or something like that. Now, to put that into perspective, how testosterone should work is it should peak when you're in going through puberty. It'll come down a little bit, and then it remains basically stable until you're about 30 or so, and then you lose about 1% per year. So think about that. They took normal, healthy young men and they decreased their testosterone worth 10 to 20 years worth when they're supposed to be from like 30 to 40 years old. They decreased that in a week just from not sleeping well.
Oh, damn, yeah.
That's short term, right? Like you can recover, right?
You can recover from it by getting it basically think of deeper stages of sleep as like a battery. Like when you plug your phone in when you go to sleep, if your phone's constantly cutting in and out, like you're not going to charge if your like charger's cutting in and out, you're not going to charge your phone as much. But if your phone's connected the whole night, like you're going to charge it the whole time. So think of it that way. You'd have to then leave your phone charged longer, either the next night or over a conglomerate of the next few nights to get it back to that level. So it does come back, but not if you don't sleep. And let's be honest, how many of us when we were that age were like, hey, I didn't sleep well last week. I'm going to really focus on sleeping well this week. And it's just like none of us. We didn't do that,
Yeah. All right. Switching from sleep outside of the gym, I want to talk about some of your crazy training methods. It started with Devin Rose. I remember seeing stuff with you guys loading your elbow weird, doing like plyo bicep curls and things. And now I see you doing plyo pullovers with Sim. When, if ever, do you think that type of training will be accepted, like at least a little bit more accepted in a sport like baseball?
Real quick, I was going to say, even taking a step back, I'm down to hear like your like the reasoning behind it as well for people who aren't like super familiar with it.
Sure. So when you look at rehab prevention, excuse me, injury prevention. Prevent rehab. Well, I mean, that's really what it is.
Oh, yeah.
It's when you look at injury prevention and rehab in today, let's talk about the elbow, right? Generally, what you're prescribed is a large amount of rest. You're prescribed a ramp up that's not long enough. And then you're prescribed a certain amount of pitch limit. It's all about what you don't do, if that makes sense. It's not about what you do to keep your elbow healthy. So what Devin and I were like is like, why don't we just, we know how to program for a back squat or for a deadlift to like get stronger in those areas. Our thought was like, why don't we just do the same thing that we do for main power lifts, and we just program that for our muscles around our elbow? Like that sounds like a good idea. And at first we were like, I don't know, are we going to die? And then on second thought, we're like, I mean, neither of us really care. We're both kind of, my elbow's hurt and he was done. So it was like, I mean, I don't really care, and we ended up finding that that's essentially what, what's it called? Arm wrestlers do. They essentially do that. Like they take these ridiculous positions, they apply a ridiculous amount of force in these positions, and obviously they build up over time. But surprise, surprise, their body adapts to the training that they give it. So that was our goal, was to basically just train our elbows like we would train any other important compound lift. And it worked pretty great, man. I mean, as the only things that we used to determine was it successful was, did we die? Number one. And the answer was no, neither of us died. Neither of us died or got hurt, which is good. Anecdotally, we both felt pretty good. I wasn't throwing at the time. Devin was throwing. So for me, it doesn't really matter, in terms of like how I felt, because it doesn't, like, we would need to know how the person felt during throwing. But really it was just kind of a proof of concept, was, can we do these things? It was going against the mantra that, like, to keep yourself healthy, you need to keep taking away. We don't want to look at it that way. We want to look at it. What are the actionable steps I can do? What can I actually do? What steps can I take to make sure, well, not make sure, but give me the best chance to stay healthy? And that was kind of our proof of concept. But I would like to point out, like, a lot of people think a lot of the lifts and training that they see on my social media is super crazy. And I would like to point out that the vast majority of it are from other places. So like pullovers have been done for hundreds of years in javelin throws,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's one of their main staples. It was actually, you've heard of the gallon of milk a day. Have you heard of that? Like, to get bigger, just drink a gallon of milk a day and lift. Well, that started.
Lindley did all the milk though. He got small.
That started in the early 1900s with the gallon of milk a day, squats, and pullovers. That's how that started. Like, the pullover in the early 1900s was today's bench press, if that makes sense. So I was having a conversation with a guy that I really respect in terms of strength and conditioning. And he made the comment, when we were talking about pullovers, he made the comment that he likes to keep things basic and stick to the basics. And I'm searching for the term that he used.
Bread and butter.
Yeah, it was like stick to the normal things, the things that work, like the things that have been done forever, was essentially the context. And I was like, but I feel like that's what pullovers are, if that makes sense, because they've been done forever in javelin throwers. They're just not done in baseball, which doesn't mean that they haven't been done forever with good results. So all I did with the plyometric pullovers, Kyle, was just apply the science, I guess, of the thinking behind a plyometric. And we were just like, well, how can we apply this to the upper body? Because the arm is very plyometric in nature during the throw, like we all know. And so I was just like, well, how can we recreate that? So that's what we came up with. The movement itself is not injurious as long as you do it correctly. So why not add, instead of manipulating the weight, why not manipulate the speed into the elastic part of the movement? And that's really where we came with that specific lift. That's really how that one came to be. But yeah, the whole point, I guess, is I don't think the lifts are that ridiculous. I think they're very they're very first principles based, where it's like, what are we trying to accomplish? And if we started with what are we trying to accomplish, irregardless of what's been done, how would we do that? And then once we come to the conclusion of like, how would we do that? Then we'll see, well, has anyone done something similar to this? If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Do you think there's a way that gets implemented, or that gets more like widely accepted?
Oh yeah. I think when everybody throws 98, I think when you have no option, that's when I think, that's fair. Because if the average fastball velo was 88 in the big leagues, no one's throwing weighted balls because they don't care. The only people who are training and like searching the fringes of training for things that might work are the people who are being left out of the system. If you're included in the system, you don't care. Like the old Casey Weathers quote about Driveline in the mid 2010s, where he's like, Driveline's the island of misfit toys, where it really is. It was the people with nowhere else to look. And they just found a group together in Driveline at that little facility in Kent. But I think that's really what it would be, is when the velocities are so ridiculous that it's literally like, look, I want to play pro ball, and I throw at the time, or in the future, it's going to be like, I want to play pro ball, and I only top 94. I need to top 98 to make it. Yeah. And I think when that becomes the norm, then like these ridiculous training things will no longer be ridiculous, because people will say, oh, well, I mean, you might as well give it a shot because you have no shot where you're at.
Just include him in the in Trevor's next free agency announcement video. Just have it be exclusively clips of plyo pullovers.
Yeah,
that'll get everyone on the train.
No, not that one. Trevor was super in on the super maximal eccentric stuff, because for those of you who know Trevor's program from a few years ago, where he was forced to do 6-second eccentrics for an entire off season for every single lift. Nice. And then the best part was he did everything exactly as he was supposed to do it, lifting wise, for 3 months straight of just every day doing a lift he hated. Mm-hmm. He showed up to spring training and he was the same weight with 2 pounds more fat and 2 pounds less muscle. That's the best part. But introducing the super maximal eccentrics to him he was like, oh, it makes so much more sense. I'm not applying a strong enough stimulus by just doing an eccentric with a light weight. Like the act of doing an eccentric is not a big deal. Mm-hmm. It's the stimulus that we're looking for on the body, which if I'm doing it with way lower stresses than my body can handle, it's not going to make any sort of adaptation. Yeah. So it was a very logical next leap. It's like, oh, we want to train whatever we're trying to train. It's a whole bunch of different things. We're using eccentrics as the vehicle to get what we want adaptation wise. And then, okay, we just need to make that as strong as possible in terms of the stimulus.
Yeah. Yeah. We got a couple questions in the chat. So I think the first one, kind of a general question. I know I've had to answer this before. I'm interested if you have any, Dean, but top book recommendations for building a base knowledge of baseball kinematics. You got anything? Any fire Rex, Dean?
I don't. Everything I learn, well, not everything, but the vast majority of things I learn in that vein are from reading what you guys write. For me, it's very all encompassing, because then I have a question and I ask, and Kyle, Lindley, and I talk for 2 hours and try and figure out the answer.
I've had various people like ask me a similar question, just like, what's a good book? Like, is there a biomechanics of baseball for dummies? And not really. I mean, there's the Bob Kai's book. I think like biomechanics of hitting, which is all right. As far as for pitching, not too much. But what I usually say is like, look, if you want a base knowledge of baseball kinematics, you just need a base knowledge of kinematics, which unfortunately, again, there is not really like a biomechanics for dummies book out there. But the best you're going to do is just be able to like read into previous baseball biomechanics related research, because you like understand that movement. And then anything that you don't understand as far as like anatomical movements, like shoulder horizontal abduction, external rotation, whatever it is, like there's tons of like Googleable resources to help you understand like what those movements are relative to that, to get like a decent understanding of kinematics. And then like obviously like all of the Driveline Baseball, blogs and stuff that we put out, pretty helpful, but realistically just not that much in terms of like a book for base knowledge of baseball kinematics.
I do have a note on that, Brady. I was thinking that conversation we had about the mechanical explainer videos, or the pitcher mechanics explained videos, where you had said that it was phrased in such a way that you would not want a biomechanist to read it and to try and learn, but you would love for a player to read it to try and learn, or to watch it to try and learn. So that would be my answer to this: is if you're looking for something that's like from a biomechanist perspective, if you are in the science field and you are a biomechanist, I don't know of any good resources. If you are a pitcher and you want to, how can I get a baseline level of knowledge that I can then apply to my own stuff? That we can absolutely offer in online training, as well as the Pitching Mechanics Explained product at Driveline. So you can either get in touch with support@drivelinebaseball.com for that, or you can DM me and I'll shoot you a link.
Yeah. Or I'll just Venmo you, dude. Just hit me up. I'll just buy it, and also I'll still Venmo you it.
Also, the Driveline Biomechanics mini course created by Lindley.
Coming soon. Next couple weeks.
Next couple weeks. Yeah, so those would be pretty fire. It's a good call. So the other someone asked, how can one increase REM sleep?
Oh, wait, bro! You're gonna skip over my girlfriend's question like that?
I mean, she knows the effects of bunk beds on REM sleep. Best sleep you ever get.
She wants to know Dean's answer on it. So, my girlfriend's showing the chat again. Could you touch on the effect of sleeping in bunk beds on REM cycles? Obviously a hypothetical, but Brady and I were in a bunk bed for a year. So Dean, from a sleep expert point of view, what would your guess be? You think our REM increase or decrease in that situation?
From a sleep expert point of view, you definitely have to ask a sleep expert. But my take, from what I've learned on the internet, would be definitely not up, Brady. If it's tough, because this goes like with people, especially in college, you may be spending the night with a roommate, or you may be spending the night with a girlfriend or whatever, if two different people, you're going to be hitting different sleep stages at different times. So if they have a different schedule than you, if they wake up, because after every sleep stage, generally you get back to awake. So if they move around and wake up and they wake you up, you better hope that your sleep cycles are perfectly timed, which let me promise you, they won't be.
Oh, I don't know. I think Caravan and I cycles synchronized pretty quickly. You'd be amazed.
We have pretty good sleep cycles. The only thing I'll say on this is just I
had pretty good sleep cycles.
I remember, we both got really tired around 2:45 a.m. I remember the first night in the bunk beds, dude. Brady was top bunk. For you guys that know us in person, Brady's a bit heavier than me. I'm chilling in lower bunk, and I remember I think Brady gets pretty crazy sneezes, has had some sinus issues. Remember when he got on the top bunk, dude? He ripped the biggest sneeze, and I just remember seeing that like skinny twin bed, $50 off, also a $50 thing off offer up bunk bed just cave in, dude. Just like, and I'm just like, oh my god.
The age limit was like 14 on that thing. Idea. That probably also factored in as well.
I love it. Yeah, quick answer is just anything that wakes you up out of this answers the next one too. Anything that wakes you up out of REM or out of that sleep cycle, it isn't normal sleep to skip like directly back into deeper sleep. So when you get woken up, you gotta go stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4. You have to, or you generally do. You don't have to. There's like other situations where you don't, but the vast majority of the time you do. So if you get woken up, you're getting pulled out. So just don't get, a big part of getting more REM sleep is making sure you don't get woken up.
Yeah. Maximize your sleep cycles. Fire. We had another one. Okay. Hey Dean, could you speak on your understanding of the
give
throw?
The peeps a shout out, dude. Give the peeps a shout out.
Antony. I'm not even going to try to pronounce this last name. You would say that on the one with just a tough last name.
Is the last name Brady?
No, not quite. I've heard you mention the analogy of spring. Wondering if you could elaborate on how that affects the way you train players. It's pretty in-depth one. This is a bag of worms question. I like it.
Nice. Well, first, I would like to point out that the
don't give away your secrets here, Dean. Don't give away.
Yeah, I got you.
Because one of the questions, real quick, was how much does pitching mechanics explainer cost? So,
well, I think it's $149 right now.
Okay, $149.
Yeah, $149. You get
10% off
a bunch of videos. Yep. Yeah, we'll honor that for sure. If you get a bunch of videos, it's like a half hour of video that explains how the throw works, and then you get a sit down with a Driveline trainer who will then go over, make sure you understand all that information, as well as apply it to your mechanics. So it's a pretty all encompassing thing. It's a great one stop, like good snapshot type thing. What was the quote? Oh, the spring analogy.
Spring.
Yep.
Yeah. So first off, I would like to point out that this is a very not popular analogy with the people in the R&D department because that is not how muscle action works. They are not springs. However, it's great, as they've said before, it's great to explain to athletes because we don't need to talk about the very specific. You just don't need to understand the actual, like what's exactly happening with the loading and unloading of different structures.
Yep.
You know, it's a quick and easy thing. But basically, the whole point around the spring analogy is just to understand that like the movements before the movement you're trying to make load the movement you're trying to make, and they need to be timed correctly so that loading helps unload at the like with the most possible force. So if multiple different things load a movement that's then going to unload during a concentric part of the throw, those things have to all be timed together to get the biggest stretching or loading of that piece that they're trying to unload into. And I think that's the biggest thing that it really helps people understand.
There's actually some research. Dr. Aguinaldo at Point Loma, Nazarene University, he published some research about using a new modeling technique called induced power analysis. Or it's not new, but newly applied to the throw.
IPAs,
and basically,
baby.
he found that
superior analysis.
The trunk rotation contributes the most to elbow power or power at the elbow joint. So basically, trunk movement is contributing a lot to how much power you can produce with your arm, which is, I think, goes to support the whole spring analogy in the way that you explained it just now about how the movement that happens before. So like trunk rotation is happening as you go into layback. So that is therefore the trunk movement is the movement before the arm movement. So it loads the arm and helps maximize that. So I think it's really interesting.
Dean, do you still use Mokka, or how often or how much did you use Mokka?
When it first came out, that was amazing, dude. Mokka, for those watching who don't know, is just like you could throw in any athlete's biomechanics take, like their 3-dimensional biomechanics take, and you could get a stick figure of it, which was amazing. And then you did that, right, Brady? That was a you thing. Yeah. And then what was it?
I did not make Mokka. Mokka's been around since mid.
Venmo Brady for 10% off on Mokka.
Yeah, Mokka is like a free C3D viewer. Came out like early 2000s.
And then what was it, like 2 or 3 weeks later, you just freaking outdid yourself like no other and found that Visual 3D was free for use?
Yeah,
right?
I think like Bodie or someone messaged me about getting that up, and then I did the Mokka thing, and then I was like looking at some I think we were updating our like licensing on C-Motion, and I was on the website, and I just saw the free resources tab, and I was like, oh wait, we can do this like way better. Like this is going to be so much easier. And it was like, unfortunately like 3 weeks apart.
Yeah, it was literally going from, in a grand total of like 3 weeks, it went from we can't look at, we being trainers, right? Like we can't look at motion capture data in a 3-dimensional view. Yep. And then a few weeks later, it went to, we can look at in a stick figure view, which was a 0 to 1, which was amazing.
Yeah.
And then a few weeks later, it was like, well, now not only can we look at it from a skeleton perspective, we can also pull up any piece of data we want to know about anything in terms of how fast it's moving, the angle it's at, the torques that are on the joint, literally anything. So it went like from 0 to 1 and then from 1 to 1,000 in like a 3-week span.
Yeah.
Which that was a freaking ride. Right? That was a ride, dude.
Yeah.
But no, I don't use Mokka at all anymore, but I use Visual 3D a whole lot. It just makes it really easy explaining what's going on in the mechanics when you have that video, that visual next to it for the athlete to understand. They could put that graph next to the visual. It makes it a lot easier.
Really quick, how long did it take you, Dean, to get comfortable with understanding line graphs and also the difference between like position and velocity graphs? Because I think from somebody who doesn't have a lot of experience with that, I think it's really tough. Like even our biomechanics report has a lot of line plots basically showing like positions over time. And it's really, really hard to picture that and what that looks like in the throw or what it even means, not even what it looks like, but what it represents. So is there anything are there steps you took to get more comfortable with that? Or did that just like come with reps?
Just to reps. And one of the tough things, I mean, you sent me a graph recently where I literally had to be like, what is on this graph? Like I had to ask you, what is this graph? And you explained it to me. And then I pretended like I was doing something else while I Googled what the heck that meant for the next like 10 minutes. And I literally was just trying to like conceptualize like what the hell is on this graph. So it takes a little bit of time. I wish I had a cheat code for it, but it just took me time.
Mm-hmm. The reason I asked, Dean, is I was curious, for someone who's very, very interested in biomechanics and obviously realizes like how much there is to learn and also how much uncertainty there is about like deriving too quick of insights from biomech data. I was curious if playing with Mokka and Visual 3D, kind of like what that really changed or like what you found yourself noticing more or paying more attention to in someone's pitching motion, if at all.
Yeah, it was huge. It allowed us to actually get numerical values to different positions. So a lot of it, I kind of intuitively already knew that for something to unload, you had to first load it, and that had to be timed correctly. I intuitively already knew that because I've thrown, and I couldn't put it into words and explain it to you, but it was a bias that I had when I was looking at the data initially. So that's what I was always looking for, was the peaks and how is this movement, like where does it peak and then come back down, things like that. How does it transfer to the next movement, things like that, which that just gave me it's so much more. If someone has only used videos and they haven't used Visual 3D or having graphs associated with the movement, it is such another world. It's so much more insightful as terms of what's happening. I don't know if I can say it any better than that. It's so much of an upgrade.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I know that when we did the like Mokka change, dropped a blog with like links to all the C3D files that people could play with. And you can do the same exact thing with the free version of Visual 3D and any of the C3D files that we've released as part of like our study publications in the past. And I think
released 30 more today.
Ooh, 30 more. Yeah, and I definitely know that in the future we would like to create more like free educational biomechanics resources like that, so that just like any listeners out there that don't have access to a optical motion capture system, just like in your backyard. Hopefully we can get some data out there that more people can play with and have access to. So.
Dean, kind of a thing I was going to ask when we were talking about training, but I figured too juicy and good of a topic to not ask. And I am, the way I'm going to ask it, I am really curious about the answer. Obviously, all four of us are much higher on benching for pitchers than the industry consensus, mostly because the industry consensus is very, very low. But certainly rising over the last couple of years. I was curious, like, what do you think? What big nuance do you think is missing there? And or like, are there, assuming they're not injured, are there certain pitchers and or body types that you would not encourage to bench more?
Yeah. So The reason I like benching so much is it targets the pecs, obviously, which are a main internal rotator of the shoulder.
What's up, baby?
Why? Yeah.
That's a lot of
you set me up
testosterone.
this whole time. Yeah, you set me up this whole time. You just wanted to do that.
I just sit down and start benching.
Yeah. You pull out the rack, the bar just comes out of nowhere, and you just start benching. So I made a whole video on this, which is explained much better because I spent a lot of time making sure I hit every point, but I'll try and recap it. The reason I like benching so much is it really targets the pecs, which are main internal rotator of the shoulder. You can build up like a lot of rate of force development, a lot of muscle qualities, and a lot of tendon qualities through benching, which I think if you don't do pressing movements, you're going to have a really tough time doing that. If you don't actually train the pecs in that manner, you're not going to actually build those qualities. And those qualities can help a lot. The reason why I started looking at it, this was a long time ago. I've been through so many rehabs that I have heard over and over and over again that if you want to accelerate your arm, you have to be able to decelerate your arm. That was the biggest thing. And what the incorrect piece of information that then puts into your brain is that the forces during deceleration are higher than the forces during acceleration. So you don't realize when you hear that that's what that's telling you, but you take that piece of information and you understand it that way. Oh, well, deceleration is much more stressful than acceleration. But then this was one of the things that I found. I was playing around with like looking at Visual 3D. This was years ago, or not years ago. This was about a year ago. And I was looking at the shoulder torque graph and I'm like, whoa, the stress at max external rotation is like 3 times higher than the stress during deceleration. And I sent it to Brady and I'm like, is this a thing? He's like, yeah. Like, why? And he like totally understood it already. So I'm sitting there like my mind is blown and Brady's just like, yeah, I don't see what the big deal is. So that was a big switch for me is like I understand trying to stay healthy as improving your ability to handle torque and to handle stress above what you will be asked to do in the movement that you're doing. So for me, it made a whole lot of sense that like if the vast majority of the arm stress, or if you're having this drastic amount of arm stress, when the arm is loaded in external rotation, which it's loaded by the internal rotators are loaded in that position, then those internal rotators, you should probably be training them to handle not only that stress, but above and beyond that stress. Yeah. So that for me was the big turning point in realizing that bench is really good. Now, why people don't like bench is because they get tight from it. Well, this is why people in the baseball industry don't like it. They get tight from it in throwing. You actually lose internal rotation of the shoulder, so you can give it to external rotation of the shoulder. So that becomes a problem when you get near the bottom of the bench press rep because you don't have the internal rotation to actually get to that position. So how you get around that is you just use a different bar. So you can just use a neutral grip bar, change the position of your hands, and you're good to go. I know a lot of people are like, oh, well, just use dumbbells and you're good to go. I generally shy away from dumbbells because I watched a very high level thrower take some dumbbells back and about to bench them. And one just kept going and it pulled his arm all the way back into external rotation and like rebounded back out of external rotation and then fell. So he had an elbow scare for a little bit just from a mishandling of dumbbells. So when you start to get to these really heavy weights, like that's the point of training, right? Is to push yourself. When you start to get to these really, to push yourself to build an adaptation, I don't want to be misquoted, which I'll still be misquoted, of course, but that's fine. When you start to push yourself at these really high intensities, I want to try and make it as safe as possible, which I think a neutral grip barbell, and if you can handle a normal barbell, like more power to you, do it. You know, I got plenty of guys that I program for that use a normal grip barbell because they just have more internal rotation. They can handle it. I can't, so I don't use it, you know, but I hope that answers it.
Do you bench more with a Swiss bar now than you do regular bar?
No, I'll still bench more weight. Now, bench more often. I never bench now with a straight bar. I was having a bunch of neck problems, but like front of the shoulder problems just from like impinging because I just don't have the range. You can't load a position you don't have the range. Well, you can. It's just going to hurt, which it did. So I'll only bench now with a neutral grip bar, which makes training a little bit more difficult because you have less options in terms of variability, but it doesn't hurt. So that's what I like to start with.
Dude, and we had Taiki last week, but we couldn't get him to say anything juicy about Trevor's free agency, even though we had him on a couple of days before. What do you got for us, bro? Post announcement. You got any juice for us that you can share with the podcast audience?
Sure. For those that don't know, Dean is actually the one that convinced Trevor. So if you have any problems with it, go after him.
So
Dean said no to the Mets. Dean said, "Yeah, no, I know we dropped the link about the Mets merch, but dude, just fucking pull it. Nobody's gonna care."
Oh man. I'll word this in a way that I can say it. It was blindsided me completely that's where he was going. I think the best part about this whole thing was if you were to ask Trevor during the whole time, like, where was he going? He would tell you, I don't know. And he was 100% serious. Wow. So he had basically given it over to his agents to let him do it. And so Trevor was like kind of finding out as we found out type thing.
That's wild.
Yeah. But no, man, there were, good for him. Good for him. That's awesome. He got everything we wanted, which was flexibility, got plenty of money, and in such a big market where I think this is worth noting. I texted him and congratulated him after he signed. And I think it's really important to note that he had said, "Thanks, man. It's great," and then said why it was great for everybody else. So why it was great for Luba Sports that this is now her first big deal that's under her belt, and it's now in this big market, and how Momentum, which obviously you guys had Taiki on, which now they're in LA and they're in this big market. And I think it's really important to note that he had listed off like 4 or 5 things of why it was great for everybody else. Which I think is just a testament to him. A lot of people like to paint him as somebody who doesn't care about other people and kind of a douchebag, but I think a lot of people don't see the real side of him, which is like he genuinely cares about other people, and they won't see that because they're blinded by everything else, but it's fine. I just think it's important to note.
100%, yeah.
Nice. Dean, when are you coming back up to Seattle?
Bro, round trip flights are under $100. So if anybody's trying to give me a spot to crash, I'm in.
Dude.
Oh, hey, you definitely crash here.
Hey, Jackhammers.
What are you gonna say?
Jackhammers break ground on the 16th for fourth place.
Oh shoot! Let's go, dude.
So I think hopefully like early March to give you like a more concrete day to potentially.
Oh wow, good for you. Good for you. For the people watching, this is for the force plates in the mound, which we have been waiting for a long time. Partially because of us, partially because of other people. Just partially everything.
Partially COVID. I mean, honestly, largely partially COVID.
But that's all right, man. I'm pumped. That's going to be how awesome for you guys too. I mean, that's going to be like when you first started capturing high level throwers. I imagine it was like you and Caravan are sitting there and like, bro, we're not going to sleep because look at all this data we have. Yeah. You know,
it just made next year's metric audit 7 times longer. So
of course it does.
Yeah.
Just wait for the 2030 metric audit, dude.
Yeah.
You're gonna have everything involved in there.
Yeah, it's gonna be ridiculous.
That's gonna be the only R&D KPI we have, dude. that list of KPI projects Joe posted, it's just gonna be 2 years ahead of time. It's gonna be at 2030.
Yeah,
2030 bucket audit.
Finish the 2030 buckets. Yeah. It's like, bro, it's 2035, and it's like, I know. Have you looked at this thing?
Yeah, we're hiring analysts for that right now. That's actually the intern application. Oh yeah,
Dean, great to have you on, man. I was gonna say, final question for me. Because I wanted to at least cover some of the topics, or I cover this topic. What do you got, bro? What do you got on general diet and or what you've been munching lately? Because I know you're a big meal prep guy.
Yeah,
and I'm about to eat in an hour and a half, dude. I'm trying to get an appetite going, so talk to me.
I generally follow the vertical diet, which is a Stan Efferding thing, which basically just like covers all macronutrients that are really important, and then builds on to get your covers all the micronutrients and then builds on top of that with the macronutrients. So that's from Stan Efferding. If you don't know anything about diet, I highly recommend starting there. It'll get you looking at food in a very systematic way. It talks a lot about how you eat and how that can affect production of different hormones in your body and make sure you stay healthy and things like that. One of the big things I'm really excited about is there are continuous glucose monitors that are becoming available for like just normal people to use. which is basically you got a needle in your arm at all times, but it's constantly measuring the amount of glucose in your blood, which if you don't know anything about it, just picture it as like you can figure out which foods your body is happy with and which foods your body is not happy with, which is really cool. That's a drastic oversimplification of what's happening. But that's what I'm excited for as far as nutrition going forward. I think there's a lot that has not been done in terms of insulin sensitivity in athletes. And once you're super resistant to insulin, good luck partitioning your nutrients to where you want them to go. They're just not going to go where you want. Which is a big deal. You know, if you're an athlete, I mean, you talk about professional athletics, if you gain 2 miles an hour, that could be the difference in your career. Yeah. So any tiny little thing like this really matters. And I know I kind of didn't really answer your question, but that's what I'm excited for in terms of nutrition, is being able to individualize it for each guy, measure much more things that aren't currently measured, like macronutrients are not the whole story, and be able to really institutionalize a lot of these things into making guys better.
It's fire. Big fire.
And obviously people can find you on Dean Jackson YouTube channel. Have you been putting media on any other platform or mainly YouTube and Twitter?
YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. XX Can Flex. That's Twitter and Instagram. And Dean Jackson. I don't actually know how to find my YouTube name, so I think it's just Dean Jackson. But you'll find it.
And listen, dude, if your girlfriend's interested in a split deal on the thumbnails, definitely willing to pay at least $8 per episode. I'll say that right now.
Well, how about this? If she comes with me up to Washington when I make this next trip, I'll see if I can convince her with all that money that you're getting Venmo'd from. You're Venmoing other people.
Venmoing, dude. I'm broke.
You're down. I don't know how that's going to work, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if we can get a nice little. We'll get you some different faces or whatever. Really, a broad spectrum of thumbnails you can use.
Let's go.
Even better if you could take the selfies for us and they could just be your face on our thumbnail.
Yes, that's what we need.
Well, I appreciate you guys having me on. It was great. I would like to point out I currently have the record for going from like the drastic change in camera quality from the beginning to the end of the of this talk. So I didn't realize I was going to be losing a little light here.
Yeah,
but I'd like to take that record for sure.
The content was fire, though. The content made up for it. So it's, the audio.
Good sound, though. Shout out, Cal.
Yeah, that's what I was
sound sucks.
I'll switch to my shitty camera right now, bro. I'm about to beat you.
Okay.
Oh, no,
all right.
No.
Thanks for coming on, Dean.
Thank
Talk
you,
to you later.
Yeah, guys. Great to see all of you.
Peace out.